Every entrepreneur eventually faces a moment when the numbers stop being numbers. They become decisions, they become pressure, they become payroll, risk, opportunity, fear, and sometimes survival. Welcome, or hopefully welcome back to The Reluctant Entrepreneur. My guest today, Jonathan Maharaj, has built his career helping leaders make better decisions when the financial pressure feels overwhelming. Jonathan is an award-winning CPA, CFO, strategic finance advisor, and financial thought leader based in Wellington, New Zealand. Over more than 20 years, he's worked across auditing, consulting, and strategic finance with founders, executives, listed companies, global brands, nonprofits, and small to medium-sized businesses. He's also the founder of Aurora Financials, a remote-first advisory built around high trust, practical strategy, and financial clarity for companies ranging from early-stage ventures to established enterprises. His work centers on helping leaders navigate volatility, turnarounds, growth pivots, and the difficult decisions that often come with running a business. But what makes Jonathan especially interesting for this podcast is his philosophy: help people first, and the money follows. That's not always the message entrepreneurs hear. We hear scale first, sell first, grow first, chase profit first. Jonathan brings a different perspective, one that connects financial discipline with trust, resilience, and human-centered leadership. Today, we'll talk about his journey from Fiji to New Zealand, the decision to build Aurora Financials, what entrepreneurs often misunderstand about money, and why financial clarity may be one of the most important leadership skills a founder can develop. And it all begins right now. Stick around. Jonathan, welcome to the show. I'm so glad you're here today. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Good day, Mike. Thank you very much for having me here, mate.
Yes, you're very welcome. It is 4:03 p.m. where I am here in Southern California. You are on the other side of the earth. What time is it there?
Yes, it's 11:04 a.m. And we're a day ahead. So I talk to you from the future, Mike.
Yes. So if you want your fortune told, just too bad this isn't a call-in show. You could tell people what's going to happen tomorrow. As I mentioned just before we went on the air, I was in New Zealand 4 or 5 weeks ago, and the Bay of Islands and Auckland, and it was lovely. I really liked it. I love what the Australians refer to the patch of Pacific Ocean between the two countries. They call it the ditch. And apparently there's quite a bit of rivalry. I don't know if it's a sports rivalry or what, but there's quite a bit of rivalry between the Aussies and the Kiwis. At least that we picked that up as a tourist. Is that reciprocal, or is that mostly on one end?
Well, I would say I describe it as we get along, but there are certain things where we agree to disagree. The simplest example is the difference between Americans and Canadians. And I often get the accent mixed up, and I have to apologize. I'm sorry. Didn't mean to offend. But we have a lot of banter, a lot of rivalry when it comes to sport and other things. But we're the closest of neighbors, and so. Culturally, some differences, but a lot of similarities as well.
Yeah, that's what we picked up there. But the people were lovely. So go New Zealand. So Jonathan, you originally came from Fiji and built your career in New Zealand. How did that journey shape your view of opportunity, risk, and entrepreneurship?
I grew up in Fiji, Mike. It's a very beautiful place. I would say it's natural beauty, but also it's a third world country, right? We don't have we have a lot of natural resources. But since we became independent from England, the country has had lots of political challenges in terms of the way it's been run, and we've had multiple coups, and many people have left. There's been a lot of brain drain. And so I would describe my upbringing there as one of this paradox between beauty and chaos. Such a stunning, beautiful place, and amazing people, ordinary people there, are warm, friendly, even though, they don't have a lot, they will welcome you and take care of you. And so some lovely people. you get to a stage when you are growing up, and then you start looking around you at what the opportunities will be like if you were to stay. And I realized after finishing my university that not much has changed, since I grew up, since my parents have lived there. And so you could look ahead and you could say, hey, there's a lot of challenges. New Zealand really appealed to me because it was only a 3-hour flight away, and so still close to family, but one of the most friendliest, safest, politically stable countries. And they have a large Pacifica population already here. And the indigenous community, who are called the Maori, have a lot of similar, cultural beliefs and practices. So it kind of felt like it kind of felt like home. And the journey was not easy. I remember, you've got to leave everything behind, your family, your friends. You've got to take that flight. You've got to start from the bottom again. No networks, nobody. And it builds a lot of resilience in you. But I feel like, your podcast is called The Reluctant Entrepreneur, right? So many of us stumble into entrepreneurship through many different ways. But we all share the same characteristic of wanting to have a better future for our family and for ourselves, right? And the way to get there is to either get really good paid employment or start your own business and have no ceiling above you, right? There's no limit, and you've just got to go for it. So those early years were a challenge, but you have to invest in your future at some point, right?
Yeah, 100%. That's very well said. Before launching Aurora Financials, you had a strong professional path in accounting, auditing, and strategic finance. What made you decide to build something on your own? I mean, you came to New Zealand with a professional background, right? So you could have, had you chosen to, probably fairly easily found a position, maybe like a partner position or something in a firm, but you chose to go your own way. How did that come about?
Yes. I think that if the honest answer, Mike, is I could not see myself playing the corporate politics, the game of, kissing people's ass and telling people that they're amazing when they're not.
Yeah.
And I saw things in my professional journey that I knew I could not fix, because when you're at this, you're on the totem pole at a certain level, right? If you're here, you cannot influence culture. You can influence it in the sphere that you're in with your
Right.
team and the few people, but the organizational culture is beyond you. And so I've had the privilege of working with some amazing people, Mike. And I've also worked with the worst of the worst. I've learned a lot from the worst. And I learned this a simple philosophy, right? Just do the opposite. So if they're behaving this way and it's leading to high turnover, just do the opposite, and you will retain people. And so what I realized was I was a good employee, Mike. I was hardworking. I was loyal. I did the best I could, but I knew there was always a ceiling. And the ceiling was, whenever you would see something and you would want to innovate and you'd want to try something better for the customer, there'd always be a reason why, oh, we've always done it this way, or we can't because of budget or resources. And that ceiling, you never can break through it if you're not higher up on the ladder. And so for me, I realized that I just saw through the dangling of the carrot and the BS, and I was like, no, I think there is a better way. And the way I look at it is like I just wanted to be very customer centric and add value the way I knew I could add value. And that was kind of the motivation to go out on my own. The business started as a side hustle while I was working full time for 8 years, and I worked evenings and weekends, and started off in voluntary roles, and then eventually it started to grow as people could see the value in what I was doing.
Yeah. I think entrepreneurs in general have very similar personality types. And one of those personality types makes it so that we don't handle stupid very well. We don't really handle bullshit very well. We tend to be bulls in a china shop. We tend not to stay quiet. Eventually, the opinion comes out, right? We're very outspoken, and we know what we want, and we have a charter to get there. And that doesn't always fit within a corporate environment very well, where there are procedures and hierarchies, and if you're trying to climb the ladder, your hands are getting stepped on by people stepping over you, and all of that. And I think that entrepreneurial personalities just don't work well in that environment. I mean, we can stay quiet for a time, but eventually that spirit, entrepreneurial spirit, is going to come out and show itself. And I know now that, I was the same way. I was always entrepreneurial, but I never considered myself an entrepreneur. Once I made that leap reluctantly and started my own business, I realized that I can never go back because the genie was out of the bottle. And I don't think I could bottle it up if I ever had to go back. I think I would be fired with cause, right? I mean, justice cause, valid cause. If I went back to work, I'd probably last 3 days because I know me. I would just say something. And to me, the quickest path between A and B is a straight line. And that may or may not really be the case, but that's the way we think. So I think your decision to not move into a professional role, as you easily could have, is probably well-founded and probably wiser than you even realized at the time, right? Because it probably ultimately wouldn't have been successful. Was there a reluctant entrepreneur moment for you, a point where you questioned whether starting your own advisory firm would be the right move? Did you have any doubts?
I think the journey of entrepreneurship is really it's unlike anything you can describe, right, Mike? It's like going on a journey without a map. You don't know what's ahead. You've got to really dig deep into that warrior spirit, or, faith. Faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen, right? You just have to take that leap. I was working in a good role. My son was about a year old, my firstborn. And it was nice. The pay was good. I thought I'd be there for a few years. I thought things would be amazing because, that's the kind of work you want to have when you have a young child, because, that they're taken care of and don't have to worry about bills and the mortgage and all of that. And I started seeing things in terms of culture and the way people were being treated, and nothing changing. And it didn't sit right with me, Mike, because I'm the kind of leader that, and maybe times have changed, Mike. Nowadays leadership is a guy sitting in a head office thousands of miles away dictating what his staff across the world have to do, right? It's so disconnected. It's so not human. And
Yeah.
for me, I've always been the person to lead from the front, like I would tell my team, Alexander the Great or Julius Caesar, right? They were not in the back office somewhere in Rome dictating. They were there on the front line with their team. And I don't mean to kind of glorify war or battles, but when you're against the odds and your leader is there shoulder to shoulder with you on the front line, it brings something out of you. You believe that it can be done. And a lot of businesses, and what I found, and the real driver for me was, I have this theory that the bigger the organization, the more the dysfunction, because everybody is looking out for themselves rather than what is in the best interest of the customer in the organization, right? Everybody wants their boss's job, then their boss's job, right? And so they're stuck in this rat race, in this dynamic of, gaslighting and toxicity and culture and all of this stuff. And for me, I'm like, that's just not me. It's inauthentic. It's not me. And so back then, my side hustle wasn't that big because I was, working full time and I was building it part time. But there was a part of me that said, I just don't think that this is right. It's changing me as a person. I didn't feel that I was happier and doing my best. And so I made the leap. I just resigned. I didn't have anything lined up. I just had my side hustle. And I had a 1-year-old. And I was like, you know what? And I looked up and I said, if I know you're out there, you're looking down at me, and I'm doing my best down here, right? I'm honest. I'm trying to do my best. I'm leading the way that is servant leadership, and I'm trying to help people along the way. And I've experienced such challenging times, but you know what? I'm going to go on by faith. And I kid you not, Mike, once word got around that I was more available, the opportunities just started coming. And in that 1 year, the business grew like multiple times, and the salary that I was on was just eclipsed by the business growth. And we just kept growing and growing and growing to the point now where I don't even look at it as work, Mike. My day is mostly around my children. I enjoy taking them to school. I have a few hours during the day. I pick them up from school. I work from home. It's all digital. And I traded security for a chance at something that was more aligned with my authentic self and values. And it paid off. And I think the reason why it paid off was because, I've always tried to help people along the way. And I think good eventually comes back.
I agree with you. You kind of built your own field of dreams, like in the movie, build it and they will come. Sometimes you just have to build it and have faith that it'll show up. Aurora, you mentioned Aurora Financials originally began as a side hustle. What did those early side hustle days, look like? And when did you realize that it could become a full business? I know you said you just decided to go ahead and do it. But what did you learn in those early days that may be helpful to you now, whether positive or negative lessons?
The reason why I was able to start it as a side hustle was because I was working in a role that didn't require any accounting or audit. It was a completely different field, and there was no conflict of interest in what I did in my spare time. And I thought I really wanted to keep up with my designations and skills, because if you're not practicing, you're not growing. And I've always come from a family that was very charitable. Like even in Fiji, we don't have a lot, but people are willing to share the little they have. And we're blessed because of that. And so I was the youngest president in a local Lions club. Can you imagine? I was in my late 20s and I was leading a team of 60 to 70-year-olds, to serve our community and make a difference. And you can imagine the communication challenges that role would have had, And what I learned, and this was around the time I was building Aurora, I learned that sometimes I didn't last long in that club. I resigned as the president because there was a lot of infighting, a lot of, again, internal politics. And for me, I was like, but we are here to help our community as volunteers, and it's outreach. We've got to serve others. We don't have to serve ourselves with, who's going to arrange a good speaker and all of this stuff. And so for me, I'm like, I want to do things my own way. And so because I was already in that charity nonprofit space, I was like, you know what? I'm sure there are organizations that need my expertise, but don't want the very expensive Big Four accounting price that comes along because you have a fancy rented office, right? And so that's how I started. I started doing pro bono audits. I built all my processes and practices up from the bottom. In those early days, I used a simple laptop with just Word and Excel, and I had a basic website. And you do everything yourself, Mike. You learn a lot. I'm an accountant, but I've learned marketing, I've learned sales, I've learned website design, I've learned, you do everything. And the key thing that I've learned, and the lesson that I want to share with your audience, is that many people complicate business, right? For me, business is simple, right? There is a problem, there is your solution to that problem, and you can achieve that solution at a lower cost than someone is willing to pay you for. That's business. And so as organizations get bigger, they get distracted by what they think the problem is or what they think the customer wants, right? Because you start getting disconnected from reality as you get investor funding and you have fancy offices and you have thousands of staff, and you lose your connection with the earth. And so for me, being very close with my customers got me to the point where I could develop something that was efficient, effective. We could compete on the triangle of price, quality, and time. Any of those dimensions we can compete on because we're agile. I describe my business as more like a startup. tech company rather than an accounting or audit business. And, I've made a lot of mistakes along the way, Mike, but I'm grateful that those early days shaped the values and the way we do things. And it's different. It's completely different. And we're not a huge team that I have, but we win clients of the likes of bigger firms like PwC and BDO and Grant Thornton, and we audit clients that have those big four firms as their accountants. We find issues. And because we do a range of different things, we can see all the 360 around finance and accounting. And for us, that's our skill. We're agile. We're competing asymmetrically. And for any business owner that's listening to this, right? If you're a startup, you have to compete asymmetrically. And the simplest way I can describe what that means, if you have bigger players in your market, right? And again, I don't mean to glorify war or battle, but a few months ago, I read this article, and it was about Russia and Ukraine and how they were fighting. And Ukraine had a miniature tank that was the size of a ride-on lawnmower, Mike, and it held off the Russian position for 2 weeks. It was drone operated by someone who was a few kilometers away at a safe distance. It had AI enabled. It was AI enabled, so it could, adjust as it went. And for 2 weeks, the Russians didn't know what was happening. They thought they were up against, a proper a force. But to the credit of the Ukrainians, like, that is asymmetric competition. You have to do things differently, because you cannot go head to head with the bigger players because of their mass. They will just crush you, right? So you have to compete in areas and in niches and in industries and business lines that is not attractive. So when I say we have non-profit clients, many people think, oh, many non-profits, they've got budget limitations and all, but non-profit as an industry is very huge,
Yeah.
right? And it is a niche. There's definitely some small ones that cannot afford a lot, but it's big. And when you carve your niche in an underserved market, which is neglected by bigger incumbents because it's not, you know,
Not
they want to
juicy
chase the
enough. Yeah, it's not financially
hundreds of
juicy enough.
thousands of dollars and $1 million fees rather than the smaller amount, right?
Yeah.
Then they neglect it, and that's where you play. You have to be agile. You have to think differently. But again, to your audience as well, right? Like, just keep it really simple, right? Do not start a business until you're very clear on what is the problem that you are uniquely positioned to solve. And a framework that I like using is something called the VRIN framework, VRIN, where you ask yourself what is valuable, what is rare, what is hard to imitate, and what's the N? Forgot the N, but yeah. But
It'll
but
come
you
back to you.
try and find some. Yeah, it's something that you can really non-substitutable, something
Uh,
that's very difficult to replace. If you can find something that you are uniquely good at compared to others, that's the next. That's where you start. A lot of businesses fail because they run out of cash. That's the main issue, I think, or the market. They can't really grow
yeah.
because it's too diluted.
Yeah, we were in a point in our early history. My company's 34 years old now. And in our first several years, I remember once we got a phone call from a customer who wanted to place a rather large order. And I realized, I don't think I realized it until that very moment, I couldn't take the order. I didn't have the money to build, we're a manufacturer. I didn't have the money to build the parts. We were running on a shoestring. And I'm like, what can we do? So I instantly changed our terms to, okay, we got to put half down. And they're like, you're a new company. We're not going to put half down. And I'm sounding stronger than I was, but I said quite firmly, then unfortunately we can't take your order. I said, well, my management will never approve this. I said, if I were them, I wouldn't approve it either. I totally agree. Because, it's a risk that you could lose that money. I said, you won't, but you could from your perspective. I totally get it. But those are our terms. And they ordered, as did the next customer, as did the next customer. They all put up resistance, but they all ordered. And we talk a lot on this show about, cash flow management. There are companies, many companies, that have gone bankrupt profitably. They were profitable, but they ran out of cash, usually because they tried to grow way too fast and they didn't understand the difference between growth and scale. And I've learned that rapid, uncontrolled growth, unmitigated growth, is a luxury no small business can afford. Unless you're one of these companies that just survives the first 10 years losing money because they're getting investor money coming in over and over and over again. Amazon was that. OpenAI is that today. But obviously they will more than likely, well, Amazon made it. Now they are profitable, but that's a model. But that's not something that mere mortals can obtain. That's the unicorns out there that can do that. We're not, I'm not a unicorn. I don't think most of people I know are unicorns. Before we go ask you more questions on your journey, where did the word Aurora come from in Aurora Financials? I always find it interesting, the origin of business names.
I, in those early days, I used to look up at the stars and I used to love this Aurora Borealis. And I kind of put Aurora in there at the beginning because it was something so beautiful, right? And I've never seen it. I mean, in New Zealand, if you fly at a certain distance, you can see it at certain times. And actually, no, yeah, it has sort of been seen around where I lived, but I was probably sleeping at the time, right? But I would, when I think about the early origins, I like that you could dream beyond what your resources were at that point of time. You could look up and you could see the stars and you could go, you know what? We're just a small speck in a much bigger universe here. And if you want to start, you start as a dreamer. You start as somebody who is, you have to see your vision first before others can see it, Mike, and I thought, you know what? I liked that and I thought, why not? And I put financials with an S at the end because as accountants, we prepare financials. And then a few years later, an insurance company came up that was called Aurora Financial without the S, and they trademarked it. And I was like, first, another lesson to small businesses: if you get a name, try to trademark it.
Yeah.
But they eventually were censured for some kind of non-compliance with financial regulations and ended up rebranding. And I'm like, there's no point trying to compete over a name, right? People come to you because of you and your value, and others can imitate or try to do whatever, but they were in a completely different industry and we were completely different. So, there was no crossover. But yeah, that was the nexus. I just looked up at the stars and I thought, what can I call this? And I thought, oh, the Aurora Borealis. These northern or southern, lights. Then
Yeah.
they looked amazing.
Yeah, I live in Southern California. We do not see those here. And even, well, not so much today, but when I first moved to Southern California from Northern California, it was in the 80s and the air was much dirtier than it is today. And I think even if we had an Aurora Borealis above us, I don't think we'd be able to see it because through all the smog. But I do live too far south to see it. But that's one of the things I'd like to see someday. Many entrepreneurs struggle with self-promotion, talking about how good you are, for example, even when they're excellent at what they do. Did you ever have that? Did you have to get comfortable with putting yourself out there and your expertise out there for others to see? Was that awkward for you?
I'm grateful that from a young age, my mom instilled a lot of growth mindset beliefs into me before we knew what growth mindset was. She'd always use phrases like, nobody can make you feel inferior without your consent. Always be the one to put your hand up and ask questions, right? Because she knew that education was the way to get out of a place like Fiji where opportunities were limited, right? Education is your ticket out of there. And so I'm grateful for the values that she gave me because I had and still have a sense of self-confidence, not ego, not that kind of pride that, we can do whatever, but a confidence and calm that I'm comfortable in my own skin being my own self. I don't need to prove myself to anybody. And if a client is unhappy with my terms or the way I present and all that, it's okay. There's other people there. I'm not desperate for the work because we want to work with people who want to work with us. So self promotion, I would say it becomes a challenge when you live in a culture that makes it sort of cringe. Right? In New Zealand, we have a saying called, it's actually a cultural issue called the tall poppy syndrome. So a poppy is a plant that grows, and if one is a bit higher than the others, we would cut down the tall poppy because we want to be equal. And I feel that that is a very insecure way to live your life, Mike, don't you think? Because we each have God given talents. You might be the most amazing singer in the world, Mike. I don't have the gift of singing, you know? That doesn't mean that I would put you down when you are in your element with your talent, making a living for yourself. And so the culture sometimes makes it feel a bit challenging to go and self promote. But from the very beginning, I was like, I'm not making it salesy. I'm just trying to help people. And how do you help people? You share your experiences, you share your knowledge, you share your success, you share your mistakes, you build trust with your audience. And, to every business owner out there, you've got to be on social media. And I share this because I've done a lot of experimenting. I've tried all sorts of marketing, right? The only thing that really has worked for my business is our website with Google search or Google ads and social media like LinkedIn, because LinkedIn builds your credibility and professionalism. And I was looking at my stats, and I've got less than 30,000 followers. But in the last year, I've reached 10.295 million people, so nearly 10.3 million people in a year. And that's such significant leverage, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm not selling anything to the audience of 10.3 million. I'm trying to grow my brand fast. But as you become well known and people want to follow you, and then, eventually you have things that you can offer them. So I would say, as a business owner, you have to be able to sell because you know your product or your service better than anyone. And even if you hired an agency to do, outbound lead generation, all of that, in my experience, agencies are a waste of money because they don't know your business like you do.
Yeah.
They cannot connect with your customer, with your story as the founder like you can. And so I would say, in the early days, if you're uncomfortable with it, you just gotta keep practicing. Like the first time you ever stand up. I remember when I was 16, it was the first time I was in school and we were doing a debate. I could feel my knees knocking and I could remember that. But eventually, when you practice public speaking and you build, you realize that, hey, these people are not going to do anything harmful to you. And you always just say, hey, they're friends and I've got to add value. I've got value to add to them. So why wouldn't I turn up? And some people will look down upon that and make fun of it and all, but at the end of the day, you're on your own journey. And I don't want to be the kind of person to live vicariously through other people. Keeping up with the Joneses and watching what that person's doing. And if that person improves, then I'm improving. It's a very shallow way of living. Some people live like that. For me, it's not. I want to be my own competitor. I want to keep improving every day. I want to be able to look back and tell my kids, and, I grew up in Fiji, not many resources, but it was always my dream to study at Harvard. And because of all the political instability, and then eventually you get older and you have kids and you wonder, hey, I don't have 2 years to go pack up and go to Boston and sit there, right? And so then I realized that Harvard actually has an extension school which allows you to study at distance. And I am about 60% through my master's degree in management there. And what I want to do, and I'm studying there because everything I'm learning, I'm applying to my business. Last semester, it was entrepreneurship and innovation, and I was like, AI, right? Cool, cool. We're building AI, right? This semester, it's marketing management. I've got a stack of books this high, Mike, on growth hacking, lead magnets, funnels, all this other stuff, because we can learn it, you know. And the reason why I wanna be a Harvard graduate, and I will graduate in 2 years. I'm
Nice.
pacing myself slowly because my kids, my two boys are a bit younger, and I want them to see me graduate. I want them to be there so that they can look at it, and I want to turn to them one day and say, "Hey, you know what? In one generation, we were able to go from my mum, their grandma, not being able to finish high school because of financial resources, to your dad being the first in the family to graduate from university, but also to be a
Not
Harvard
just,
graduate
yeah, not just a
in one
university.
generation." And we
Yeah.
started in Fiji, you know, without any handout, without any support. And the lesson I want to share with, entrepreneurs or people who are young in their journey, or even, our kids, is that if you put your mind to it and you work hard, you can achieve it. Now, I'm not naive. There's a lot of challenges and barriers, in society, a lot of stigma, a lot of cultural challenges, a lot of financial issues, a lot of people that, look at you differently based on the color of your skin, not the content of your character. Like, there are some people that are like that, and I'm not naive. I know they exist, but they're irrelevant, Mike.
Exactly.
If you are living in your own God given talent and doing what you are on earth for, there is only one Mike Conrad. There might be another Mike Conrad by name, but there is nobody like you uniquely on earth. And, we talk about marketing. The simplest way to market your business is to be your authentic self.
100%.
Don't play the corporate game of trying to be somebody that you're not and all this stuff.
Yeah, what
Be
you've
yourself.
done, I think what you've done, Jonathan, is you've created authority in your space. And you don't create authority by saying, we'll beat anyone's price, or our, we're the best. We have all these awards. That's all BS stuff. The people in the corporate world love it. They devour that for lunch, but it doesn't. The consumer doesn't care about that stuff. And I think what you've done through your LinkedIn posts and all of that, and being on podcasts, is it doesn't come across as self-promotion. It comes across as building authority. And when you build authority, and I hate the word, I say this all the time, I hate the word because it's been hijacked by other people, but you become an influencer, an authority-based influencer in your space because people connect with you. And then you start attracting much higher level clients than you would have had you been advertising like, the big four or the smaller 400 or whatever. You don't, no one in that field stands out. They're the legacy big four that stand out only because their name has just been around forever. But everyone else, it's, might as well just close your eyes. If they still have yellow pages anymore, I don't even know if they still do, just turn to a random page and put your finger down, and, that works just as well. I think what you've done is you've invested in building authority that will attract the type of people who resonate with what you're saying. And part of my background, I'm not a chemist by any means, but the machines that we build use a chemical. So I have a few phrases that I've memorized from the chemical people in our industry. And one of them is called Hansen's Law of Solubility. And it basically is like attracts like. So polar water-soluble chemicals attract water-soluble contaminants. Non-polar chemicals attract non-water-soluble contaminants. And certain chemicals attract certain type of contaminants and repel others. I think Hansen's Law of Solubility, I think like attracts like, can be applied way beyond chemicals and chemistry. I think that what you're doing is you're putting out your likeness authentically, and you will be attracting people who think like you. And when we started doing that, when we switched from braggadocious advertising, awards, and gimmicks at trade shows and all that stuff, all that noise, we switched over to this conscious marketing where we just create value and we educate. We don't even talk about our stuff. And the type of customer that we started attracting was way higher level than the customers we had been attracting previously, who were needy, who were overly price conscious. First question, we get a phone call, first question they'd ask is, how much does it cost? It's like, oh, wait a minute, we'll get there, but let's make sure, we understand your problem first. Now, when someone is attracted to the content we put out, that's probably the 20th question they ask. Almost like, oh, shoot, I forgot to ask you. By the way, how much is this? It's not what's driving the conversation. And so I do think like attracts like, definitely. What was the one difficult moment in your entrepreneurial journey that taught you something success probably couldn't have taught you?
I think cash flow is one of the biggest issues that any business owner experiences. And even in my experience, it's always hard to predict because even if you got paid in advance, many people would be hesitant to do that because of the risk of not getting the product or service, right? And so you'd probably get a partial payment, or you'd probably have to invoice when you are 80% through the job. And even if you were to invoice, what's the likelihood that someone's going to actually pay you when the bill is due? I had a client who was who took a year to pay an invoice, Mike. It was not a huge invoice. It was a small invoice. But, when economic times are difficult and things happen like that, that's beyond your business, right? You've delivered the service or product, you should get paid. And I think the key challenge with cash flow is try not to grow too fast. If you try to be sustainable, because many times a lot of businesses want that photo on the New York Times to say that ABC Limited raised $100 million in Series B and is now a unicorn. Like they live for that PR. Whereas the reality is, if you don't solve the issues when you're small, right? The payroll issues, the process issues, the invoice issues, the challenges that you're facing, collecting, debts from customers, all of those things will come back to you eventually. And, think about unit economics. If it costs you $1, you have to price it at a point that gives you enough viability. So I think cash flow, it's always a challenge. But once you experience it, I think you find innovative ways to get through it. You update your terms like you did in your business. You get paid in advance. You get paid in installments. You, have a line of credit available just to ensure that, you can get through big orders. And, even if the customer doesn't pay you in advance, it's a risk if you're a manufacturer because you have to spend money on the raw materials, the production, and all of those things. And so there is a lag between you and your cash outflow between the money actually coming in, right? So you have to fund those things. And I think once you go through the sales cycle, when you start your business, you'll know, when do you have to pay money, when do you get money in, and how do you close the gap so that it's kind of the same day, or actually ideally get the money before you spend the money.
We strive to accomplish something. I'm not an accountant, so I tend to make up terms that may not be terms in the accounting world, but I call it the matching principle, where the money comes in, the money goes out within the same period. And I define a period as about 30 days. And so we collect down payments on all orders. Very rarely do we do net 30-day terms. We will, but usually for government entities and things like that. And that ensures that as we spend money's coming in to at least cover the cost of the expenditures. That way we can grow. And we if someone said, look, I want to order 10 machines instead of the normal 1 or 2, other than labor constraints and, logistical things, that could be a problem. But financially, we could do it if everything is accompanied by some type of down payment. It's kind of partnering with the client in that case. You talk a lot about leaders gaining financial clarity. What does financial clarity mean to someone who's building a business that may not really have a finance background?
Finance, I think, is one of those skills that you've got to have some sort of understanding of, like marketing, like sales, right? And even if it's a bit uncomfortable, there's a lot of resources out there on YouTube and online to understand, like you say, the matching principle, which is a good one in accounting, right? When I first started out, I worked as an auditor, and we still do audit services. And I feel that as a profession, it was one of the best decisions I could have made, because you get to see strategy, you get to see operations, you get to see culture, you get to see processes, you get to see systems, you get to see how people behave. And a lot of times, numbers can be presented in a way to tell a certain story, but it might not always be the truth, right? And I share this with you because when we do an audit, all of our clients get the same information request. They have the same process. There might be a few additional things we would add for certain clients in different industries, right? So from our end, everything is consistent in terms of the process. And when we get information we don't get information, we can see who the outliers are in terms of what they're presenting. And what I usually find is that there's always a risk of fraud and error in the numbers, especially when you're relying on other people. So as a business owner, you have to be very diligent. Like, in your mind how much you've sold, right? And so if you've sold this much and it's cost you this much, why aren't the numbers really showing those figures? So with the financial clarity piece, a lot of what we do is really get deeper into the numbers. Sometimes the systems are not set up in a way to actually really show what is your cost of goods sold. Is that truly reflective of what the actual costs are? Are you charging, could you charge more in terms of what the market rate is compared to what you are charging, right? Are you under overcharging? What are the, why are you buying from the most expensive supplier in town? There are alternative suppliers who can match quality, and you can save if you order differently, right? And I think with the clarity piece, if you don't really get stuck in the details earlier on, the issues will start getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, right? So, for example, there was an organization I was brought on as their interim CFO. They lost, it was a $10 million government funded organization. They lost $1 million in 6 months. And the only way they found out was when one day the bank called the CEO and said, "Hey, these payments look unusual." I step back and I go, how can you lose 10% of your revenue in 6 months and nobody knew about this? Like, what was management doing? Like, I don't expect the board to know about this issue because they're not running the place. And so, financial clarity is having what auditors describe as professional skepticism. Like,
I like that.
we thank you for the information that you've provided to us, but can you please outline a little bit more about why you structured this sale this way or entered into the contract this way? What were the alternative? What was the strategic rationale? And I don't mean be skeptical about everything, because you have to trust your team. Last thing you want is a leader going and micromanaging every single thing.
Right.
But there's a critical saying of trust, but verify.
But verify.
Right?
Reagan
And so
Gorbachev,
you have
yes.
yeah, you have to really get into it, because at the end of the day, as the founder, like, your reputation's on the line, your net worth, your resources. If you've taken a loan against your property, your family, and all this other stuff, like, your financial future is at stake with your business. It's intertwined. And so a lot of the times, many people rush to start a business, where I would say, hey, you know what? Build your resources. It's like that parable in the Bible, right? You don't want to half build a house and people come and say, oh, they only got the foundations because they lack the resources. You want to think about it through carefully. Talk to people you care about. It's hard work running a business, but it is one of the most fulfilling things that you could ever do, because there is no ceiling. There is no annual leave application. There is no, like, if you take sick leave, it's sick leave, like, the work still needs to get done.
Yeah.
There's no ceiling. Like, you can achieve as much as you can, and you can do it your way without any excuses. Now you can't blame an ineffective manager or lack of resources or this or that. Like, you are the problem and the solution, and you are the person who's going to fix it. And it's a journey. It's an adventure. It's a thrill. You have your up and down days. There are days where sometimes you're afraid, sometimes you feel triumphant, sometimes you feel like, you know what, we're in a happy place. And you go through it all, but at the end, if you do it right, you set your future, yourself and your family's future up.
Yeah. Your philosophy includes the idea of helping people first and letting the money follow. I love that, by the way. How does that? How does an entrepreneur apply that without losing sight of profitability?
What is business, right? Business is, coming back to that simple analogy, understanding a big problem, creating a solution, and being able to sell the solution to those that need it for more than it would cost you to solve it, to produce the product, produce the service, right? And the key thing for me is, like, sometimes we think that cost is here, price is here, and this is value. A lot of times that's profit. Value is when somebody who bought your product or service feels that this is the value that they got and this is the price that they paid for it.
Yeah.
That is value. And I feel like, and the key thing is, you mentioned like attracts like, right? The younger people call it good vibes, so
Sure.
high vibration.
Yeah.
It's probably metaphysical. I don't know if it exists, but I can tell you now, Mike, that when you're operating on a certain wavelength or a certain level, you end up meeting people that are on the similar journey or ahead of you, or like 90% of the people are with you. Like when
Yeah.
you're high vibration, kids love you, you get along with people. I'm an introvert by nature, but I love meeting people. I love to be social. I love to go out and meet my clients and all that, because you get an energy from helping people, and you learn as well, because you mentioned you're not a chemist, but you learn certain things from chemistry. As business owners, we've got to be looking at all sorts of different industries, because there's a lot we can learn from them without you know reinventing the wheel.
Yeah.
And so for me, my key thing is, don't do business to business. Don't do business to consumer, right? All of these labels. Do human to human. Because if you can connect with people and resonate with them, they will choose you as the provider for their needs. Because firstly, they trust you. Secondly, you've got the social proof, as in the testimonials, the awards, the way you've been educated, your 34 years of experience in your manufacturing business, right? You've got government contractors, you've got clearance, all of this other stuff, right? All of those things are stepping stones towards actually getting the sale. Gone are the days where you could just harass people. Actually, some people do the hard sell into giving up their money, but at the end, they're not going to buy from you again. They will
Right.
distaste the experience, right?
Yeah.
And so if you genuinely want to help people, not everybody will resonate. And I'm being honest, right? There are people we try to help, we try to offer a lower price. You can never please them. And so I've realized that I want to be around people that want to be around me, because time is limited, your resources are limited. You want to be able to add the most value to the people that you can help, that you can grow your business with, and build something long term with, rather just in a one-off type service. So I think for me, the human to human and help people first and the money comes, that's been the story of my business. Started off being like a pro bono auditor for nonprofits, then ended up being a paid auditor, then ended up winning bigger and bigger and bigger clients because word starts getting around. And I feel like no matter how big your business grows, be humble. Stay open to learning new things. Keep your feet on the ground. And if you focus on human to human, you'll be able to listen to feedback, because your customers know what they need more than you do. And times change. I'm sure over the course of your business, the 34 years, regulation changes, tax settings changes, supply costs, and you look at your supply chain, where you're going to get things from, all of that changes. So listening, having empathy, and being human centric, I think will help you keep staying relevant despite all of these changes as your business keeps growing and evolving.
Yeah. My industry just changed in the last 53 minutes since we started talking. But as soon as we're off of this interview, I'll find out what new changes have come down. You are right. Time goes so fast when we're on these conversations, faster than it appears to go. But I do want to ask two more questions, and we are about out of time. So The second to the last question is, when a business owner is facing financial uncertainty, what's the first thing they should look at before making major decisions about cutting costs, raising prices, hiring, investing in growth, before they knee-jerk into one of the, textbook options? What's the first thing they should really look at?
First thing, try to identify the root cause of the financial uncertainty. Because if you don't get to the root cause, you probably are just touching on the symptoms and you're putting a band-aid on something that's not going to solve the issue long term, right? So for example, financial uncertainty, fine, you could just find capital, right? Get a bank loan, ask family and friends, get an investor in, all this stuff. Will it help you? No. You've got to look back. What is the root cause? How did I end up getting into this situation, right? Was I paying attention? Did we grow too fast? Did we waste money on these marketing incentives, right? And I'm always like thinking about return, like if I'm going to invest this much, what am I going to get back? So the key advice is root cause. What is the root cause for this issue? How could we lose $1 million in 6 months and we're getting $10 million of government funding? How did that happen? What happened? Where did we drop the ball? And I think if you look internally before you go out externally trying to scramble to raise funds and do all this kind of stuff, you can lead to better and more sustainable outcomes in the future.
Yeah, great advice. And finally, how did you define success when you were younger, and how do you define it now?
I think when you're younger, it's all about the material and, financial, studying at the best universities, collecting as many certificates as you can, and just climbing your way up the corporate ladder, right? That's kind of all we know when we start off in the paradigm of get a good education, get a good job, and then, settle down and do all this kind of stuff. That's what we've been taught. That's what our parents went through. And don't get me wrong, people can make great money following a corporate career path. It's not for everyone, but, it has helped all of us to learn new skills and all of that. For me now, success now is being free. I love being able to take my kids to experience things during the week rather than scrambling to the weekend to try and catch up with everyone else is in the mall, everyone else is in the park, everyone else is here. Right? I love the freedom to be able to pick and choose my clients, to be able to help people my way, rather than being told that, oh, we can't do it this way, or, like this or that, and just being happy, and feeling like you're making a difference and you're adding value, and, seeing that the good that you're doing eventually pays off in the other metrics that you really wanted, the financial, the university opportunities, all the other kind of stuff. It comes. But my philosophy is you've just got to be putting things in their right order, right? Be aligned with your values and what you are uniquely here to do first, and follow your own path. Everything else will come. If you're just chasing the money first, it's unlikely you're going to be listening to your customers very clearly, right? Because you'll be focused on the bottom line at the end of the day. So put things in the right order and good will come in its own time. Part of the journey is, the good times, the bad times, the learning times. So, yeah, I'm grateful. There's still a lot more to learn, Mike. And, and along the way, you meet amazing people like yourself. I was watching your podcast. I saw some of the people that you've interviewed, and I'm like, you know what? Yeah, you meet people who have got lots of experience and lots to share and learn from.
I've had my business for 34 years, and just when I think I've mastered everything I need to master, I talk to someone like yourself and many others that teach me that I'm still scratching the surface. My father, now he's gone, but my father would never be accused of being a motivational speaker. He was an immigrant to this country from Poland, and he had a rough time during the war and ended up in the United States at the end of the day. And he was constantly kind of angry and bitter and things like that. And I get why. I don't hold that against him. And he told me once, son, you learn your whole life and you'll still die stupid. I'm like, Okay, well, that's not exactly going to go on one of those success posters, in an office building. But I got his point, and I thought it was exaggerated. But now, all these years later, I kind of hear those words again, and I'm like, he wasn't wrong. I don't know if I would use the word stupid, but he wasn't wrong in the sentiment of that we are never done learning, and I think when we realize that, when we come to that realization that that's true, and we don't know everything, we just don't know what we don't know, that opens the door for continuous growth. Because a lot of us, we think we hit a ceiling with our growth, and we hit a ceiling because we're just done with it. It's just like when you graduate a 4-year university. Does that mean you know everything? No, it means you have 4 years worth of education, and there's still more. So I kind of celebrate that saying, although I don't print it on a wall poster, but I think it carries a lot of weight. Jonathan from Aurora Financials with an S, because he does more than one. So obviously financials plural. For my audience who would like to get more information on Aurora Financials and Jonathan, if you're watching this on YouTube, right down here, right below me, it says see more. Click on that, and the URL to his website will be there. If you're listening to this on your favorite podcast app, of course, every podcast app that we're on, and we're on hundreds, has a podcast app with show notes. Look at the show notes, and that information will be there as well. Jonathan, thanks so much for openly and authentically sharing your entrepreneurial journey with me from Fiji to New Zealand, and the sound financial advice. That's very sage, very wise, and I know that any of our audience that are kind of struggling right now will benefit from the advice that you said. So thank you for sharing that with me and my audience. I got a lot out of it. I know my audience did, and I appreciate the generosity of your time and sharing all that with me and my audience.
Thank you very much, Mike.
All right, here's some final thoughts. Jonathan reminds us that finance is not just about spreadsheets, forecasts, and margins. It's about clarity. It's about decision making. It's about understanding the real condition of a business before pressure forces decisions that may not serve the company, the team, or even the founder. His story also reinforces a theme we come back to often on The Reluctant Entrepreneur. Building a business is not only about chasing growth, it's about becoming the kind of leader who can handle growth responsibly. Jonathan's people-first approach challenges the idea that profit and purpose must be in conflict. Instead, he suggests that trust, clarity, and service can become the foundation for stronger financial outcomes. For entrepreneurs listening or watching today, the takeaway is actually simple. Do not wait for the numbers to become a crisis before you try and understand them. Financial clarity is not just an accounting function, it's a leadership discipline. Now, that is a wrap. Thanks for being part of our Reluctant Entrepreneur family. We've been very busy recording future episodes with amazing guests, so be sure to subscribe to get notified when new episodes drop. If you're an entrepreneur or know someone who would make an amazing guest, we'd love to hear from you. Visit reluctantentrepreneur.podcast.com, where you can apply or recommend a guest or just learn more about the show. And a couple of shameless plugs. I've started a new series under the Reluctant Entrepreneur brand. The new series is called Reluctant Lessons, Where Businesses Go Wrong. On this series, we dig into high-profile business failures and the story behind it all. So far, we've profiled Rubbermaid, Kodak, Blockbuster, BlackBerry, DeLorean Motor Company, with many, many more to come. There's no shortage. Check those and others out on this channel. And if you're interested in my book, The Reluctant Entrepreneur, Anatomy of a Business Startup from Uncertainty to Unstoppable, it's available in paperback and Kindle on Amazon and as an audiobook on both Audible and Amazon. And finally, to everyone listening or watching, if you find yourself stepping into entrepreneurship, whether by choice or by circumstance, remember this. Sometimes the path we never planned becomes the journey we were meant to take. Thank you all so much for being here. I truly appreciate you, and I'll see you again soon.